Hi everyone, and welcome to the FlexCast, the podcast that deep dives into the topic of flexible resourcing and flexible work. In multiple episodes over the coming weeks, we will highlight different angles by answering questions about the benefits, challenges, trends, technology, and the future of flexible work. But we're not doing this alone. We're receiving very welcome support from leading industry experts coming from the business and consumer side. This podcast is produced by Roamler, a company that provides businesses with flexible resourcing technology, also known as platform technology. In the first two episodes, we briefly explained what flexible resourcing entails. If you haven't already, we invite you to listen to the first two episodes, to get up to speed with the concept and to discover what it means and does for businesses. In the next two episodes, we'll focus more on the flexible platform workers side. My name is Gabriella, and I'm your FlexCast host. With me today is Wiggert de Haan, co-founder of Roamler, and our guest Martijn Arets, platform expert. As platform expert, Martijn examines the developments of the market, challenges the stakeholders of platforms, exposes dilemma, and has a clear vision of the future of work. The perfect guest to try to find an answer to this episode's question. What are the current trends around the platform economy and its users? So who's ready? Let's get started. Welcome, Wiggert and Martijn, and thanks for joining us today. Martijn, you're a platform economy expert. Can you briefly describe what you do on a daily basis?
Yes. First, thanks for having me. Nice being here. And on a daily basis, what I do is I do research on different platform topics, also together with all the stakeholders in the debate. I think a lot about platforms. I write about platforms on a daily basis. So, like today, I'm here in Amsterdam at your office. From there, I'm going to two different other appointments and interviews. And so what I do in general is look at different questions in a platform and gig economy, and mostly focusing on the question, okay, how to make a platform economy work for everybody.
So why did you decide to dive into the world of the platform economy?
Yeah, that's maybe a strange route, but I have a background in marketing and events. And in 2010, I quit my job to follow my dream. So I traveled for 5 months in an old Volkswagen T2 van through Europe, talking to the leaders of 20 big European brands like Alessi, Lego, Manchester United, Mini, Adidas, Skype, 20 nice brands. When I returned home, I started my own company. And I wrote a book, Brand Expedition, about my interviews with the brands. And then I also thought, okay, let's also translate this book into English. And I funded the English translation, the cost of translation, print and design, by the first equity crowdfunding campaign in the world, which was nice to get lots of media attention. But behind the scenes, it was quite a mess. So I lost about €100,000 because, there were some flaws in the system. But what I then saw is, okay, this platform has lots of potential, but it needs to change a lot before it will also work for everybody. And by then, my curiosity in this platform economy started.
And this was 10 years ago?
10 years ago, yeah.
Crowd financing, right?
Crowdfunding.
Crowdfunding,
yeah.
Yes. Interesting. And Wiggert, you are one of the founders of Roamler. You invited Martijn to this podcast. How do you two know each other?
Well, it's funny you're asking. We were just looking it up, and I don't know exactly when I met him, but we met in 2018, so a couple of years ago. And it could very well be at an event that Martijn would host. As Martijn is, what I really like about him, he is really inviting all of the platform owners and founders to talk with each other and to have a conversation on where platforms is going. And I really like it. So there's a lot of other connection that I've made through Martijn as well.
All right. And I'm curious because your interest started with crowdfunding, but it shifted now towards more working via platforms in a crowdsourced way, I guess?
Yeah, it's more that my interest because of my failed campaign, or the campaign was successful, but then in the end, the financial part failed. Was with crowdfunding, but crowdfunding is just a platform that connects demand and supply, creates trust, and then also facilitates in the transaction. And from there, I was looking much more broader to the platform economy, because this platform model works in different markets. So it started with funding, but also in goods, the sharing economy, also in labor. So I'm looking to platform topics from different perspectives.
And why do you think people choose to work via platforms, Martijn? What are their motives and what opportunities does it bring to them?
I think the best thing that you can do is ask it to themselves. But what I hear from people working via platforms, that they really like the flexibility and the autonomy by working via platform. Because normally organizational processes, they are really focused on the process and the organization, and not around the individual. And what's different platforms and working via platforms, which can be done in various ways, also within organizations, it really changes the roles, and it's really focusing on, not on processes, but on the individual. So the individual is the central point, and not the process. Yeah.
And I know that you just mentioned you did a crowdfunding action like 10 years ago, but besides that, have you yourself worked through a platform?
I didn't do any work via platforms. I did hire people via platforms. And also in the different sectors of platforms, I'm using platforms a lot. So also in the sharing economy, crowdfunding. So like in crowdfunding, I invested in about 400 different cases just to learn on how the process works. I also did in total 4 crowdfunding campaigns myself. With sharing economy, I rented out my camera and audio gear via platforms. And what I also do is just subscribe to platforms without working via platforms, just to see how the processes work. So I just subscribe till the moment I need to upload my ID or my credit cards, because then you also learn a lot about the processes of the platform.
Yeah. Well, I myself got to work today via such a platform, so I'm very familiar with them. And Wiggert, from your experience, do you hear these motives from platform workers as well? So the flexibility, autonomy that Martijn was talking about?
Yeah, I think flexibility and autonomy are, of course, well-known reasons to work with platforms. There are many other reasons, for example, why people can also develop themselves through platforms really well. So do the tasks that you're really good at, which is also autonomy, of course. So yeah, I think that are the most important reasons for people to work through platforms.
And Martijn, of course, every new development has its challenges. What challenges do platform workers face?
I think the challenge, and that's also the challenge in the platform debate, is the platform worker doesn't exist. The same like the freelancer or the employer or whatever. So it's a really different population. So some people, they use it as a main income. Some people just use it for just some additional money to buy beer when you go to the bar, because they're open right now. Yes. So it's really different, and that's also, you see that's also the problems also in the base very different per situation. So what you see in general on the gig economy challenges are the impact of the algorithm in allocating work to people, the way that the technology monitors people working, so they're being watched by the algorithm. There are of course quite some discussions on the legal status of the worker. So there are quite some challenges. What I also see is that most challenges are also just not really only focusing on platforms, but also more broad on labor markets.
Yeah, I've seen similar challenges coming through. Wiggert, how do you think platforms can tackle these challenges?
I think there are different ways of tackling the challenges. And of course, it depends on which platform worker you're dealing with, because as Martijn mentioned, there are different kinds of platform workers. But I think in general, we have the obligation to help them where we can in order to work safe and on a well-based way. So, for example, if we're able to provide insurances, for example, and it's legal, we should do it. If there's something that we can help them to build savings for later, those are things we should definitely look at, while still not jeopardizing their freedom. So, for example, there's also So, for example, there's let's say a constructor that has its own company. If we're going to bother him with an insurance, that would not work for him. But for example, a casual roamer that wants to do something in the store, although chances are really, really small that something happens there, an insurance might work really well for them.
And do you see similar trends in other platform companies, or is this specific to Roamler?
No, I think that every platform company has its own challenges and also questions in that. So what do you do? What do you don't? I think what's really is typical for platforms that they have really a kind of a attitude of facilitating the worker, because a platform is facilitating demand and supply to do a transaction, and also in this facilitating the worker also are opportunities for extra services like insurance in these kind of stuff, and also because of a platform also really. So a platform is a kind of a matchmaker between a really big group of demand and a really big group of supply. And because platforms are really the new middlemen within this normally fragmented market, there are also opportunities to really exploit these benefits of scale also for the users, like insurance, maybe some collective buying for tools or whatever. So there are different ways platforms can deal with that.
But all in all, what I hear is that the platform workers have a lot of benefits from working via these platforms, and that they're really central in the business models of these platforms, right?
Yes and no. I think that also depends on the platforms, and there's also the challenge also in the public debate, and also that's something I also talk together with labor unions about, is that some kind of platform works are kind of work that was already precarious before platforms, and will always be precarious work, like home cleaning, like food delivery. And the challenge there is that the situation in the market was already bad. And of course, that doesn't really give platforms the freedom just to also be a bad employer. But I think it's also to really be aware of the context of the markets outside the platform economy is really important.
So what do you think about how the labor unions react on those platforms? For example, in helping in households, for example?
Yeah, I think they're choosing the easy way. The easy way of saying, okay, or really advocating about, okay, having a contract is the best thing that can happen to you as a worker. So the labor unions in the Netherlands, they're really advocating for the temp agency model. But when you really are looking in, okay, but what security do you have as a worker working via such a temp model? It's quite bad. So the thing they're advocating by saying, okay, as long as you hire people, everything is okay, is just crazy. And of course, they also know. And the problem with that is because they're really focusing only on that issue, of which they know isn't the solution. They also don't give attention to maybe more important other issues, like the role of technology in managing a worker. And this is something that doesn't only applies on platform environment, but also in the worker environments at all. Let's say like with the warehouse of Amazon or Bol.com, there's also lots of technology and algorithms making decisions about the worker, and also looking what the worker is doing. So what I think is that the labor unions don't take the responsibility of putting the real issues on the agenda and only focusing on some questions that are of course important, but are not the solution. And of course, I also understand, because it's easier to get attention from media when you win a court case. But in the end, the question is, okay, but for who are you doing this? And like with the example with Helpling, the home cleaners, Helpling is competing with informal market. And the labor unions are ignoring informal markets. And of course, then you can be happy of winning a court case. But in the end, what does really change for the worker? And I think nothing.
Yeah, so more workers will end up working informal, right?
No.
If you're going to prohibit it through the platform, then house cleaners are going to work with people without even paying taxes on it or being inside for people.
Yes, the alternative for a home cleaner at Helpling is informal market, not a cleaning company.
So how could they solve it? What should the labor unions do?
I think be more honest about the real problems. I did a keynote at a CNV conference, which is a big labor union in Netherlands, just before COVID. And I started with, you say you're fighting against bogus employment, schijnzelfstandigheid in Dutch, but I think you're promoting fake security, so schijnzekerheid, because when the alternative is such a short-term temp contract, then you also don't have any security at all. So I think that the labor unions should really look more to work in a much broader sense of the word, really more focusing on the worker and not only on the contract form. And then see, but because in the end also when, like you also said, I'm also bringing platforms together to talk to each other, but as you also know, I'm also bringing different stakeholders together.
So I think my opinion is that the platform workers are not really represented through the labor union. So they're picking up the glove and are fighting for their case, kind of. Mm-hmm. But how can we make sure that? So do you agree on that, or that the platform worker is not really represented by the labor union? And if not, how can we make sure that they are being represented? Because I think, as you said, there are so many different platform workers. I find it really a struggle to represent them, or to make sure that they are represented.
Yeah, it's a good question, because I think labor unions in Netherlands already they have the challenge in representing workers at all, because if you look at the population who they're representing, it's a really old population with really nice stable contracts. So they have a lot to lose when things are changing, and labor unions are not representing flexible workers, and they're also really fighting against everything that has to do with flexibility. And your second question was?
Well, how can we solve that issue? Because I think what you're saying in the old way of working, if I would be a member of a labor union, then I would do it in the boss's his time or her time. And I would probably get time for my boss to be active for the labor union as well. So it's all being done from the boss's his time, and of course some spare time as well. But that obviously is not there with a platform worker, because all the time that they are working, or they are really working, they don't have time to or don't get paid to reassemble themselves and to represent themselves as well.
Yeah, I think at the moment that labor unions have a good story to platform, because they will also join. And of course, there are also construction you can think about, because like also with traditional labor unions, big employers are also paying a part of the contribution for them. So they are also thinking about how to fix this. So I think the main underlying problem is, the story of the solution doesn't reflect to the needs of the worker in also outside of platform economy, which is of course a shame, because in the end the idea of the concept of a labor union is really important, because it's about creating a more equal level playing field between people that want to work and people that are offering work. So I think that the role of a labor union is extremely important in labor markets, and that's also why I also keep them responsible of lacking to take their responsibility in this. And of course, there are some different constructions. There was also a paper by Jaap van Sloten that was looking to Deliveroo and say, what if we put all the workers in a kind of a cooperative? And then the cooperatives, they represent the workers with the platform, and it also gave me some ideas about maybe that the cooperative is the next phase of labor unions. And it also was quite critical also to the labor union, because what I also say is, if you as a labor union think that a fixed job is so important, so why the hell are you not the biggest employer in the country? Because it's all about collecting the benefits of scale. And when you have 1 million members, you have a lot of benefits of scale. So you can be the biggest employer of the country. And of course, the companies would never like that. But just in theory, it's of course possible.
The labor union being the biggest employer.
If they think a fixed contract is so important, of course, take your responsibility, because the only thing they are doing right now, it's also the same, maybe also then back to Roamler. So you have lots of people working via the platform, and you can do a lot of things for them. You can offer them lots of services. And like a labor union, they have lots of members. And the only thing they're doing for them is to represent them. Of course, they can do lots more for them. They can also offer assurance if they want, whatever.
Yeah, but I think that's... I understand what you're saying, and I think that could be a solution. At the same time, I think that platforms should not try to own the worker, so to speak. So I really like it if a Roamler also uses our competitors, because that makes their task more meaningful if they go to the store, for example, or if they want to do work in general. So let the Roamler or the platform worker decide which platform they're going to use, and not being kept by us, and try to bind them to us by offering them services, and then having all those parts of services with different platforms. I don't think that's a very healthy way to go.
No, I also don't say that it's the best solution to make labor unions the employer, because that will be a really interesting discussion on everything. So that doesn't also really speed up innovation. But I think what you also describe, your way of thinking with Roamler and the way of facilitating the worker is also really completely different than traditional matchmakers in labor markets. It's like with temp agencies, they're really focusing on the ownership of candidate and data. Well, platforms are much more thinking about how to facilitate. And of course, there are different platforms with different backgrounds and different intention, of course. But in general, and that's also maybe a problem in the discussion, there's lots of discussions about the Ubers and Deliveroo, but they are just one flavor of many in the platform landscape.
So let's move on to our next question on the GigCV. In collaboration with multiple platforms, you recently launched GigCV, a digital resume for platform workers in which they can easily retrieve their data for future work opportunities. How did this project come to life?
Yeah, good question. So, as you know, I'm quite long active in the debate of platforms and also gig economy. And I was looking, okay, what are the main challenges and questions within gig economy that are really focusing on also the platforms? And of course, the legal status of the worker is a question, but that's a much more broader question. That's a question about labor markets, which is already stuck for about 10 years or probably longer, but let's say 10 years, be positive today. So that isn't really a subject where I thought, okay, I'm going to make the difference in that. But what I also saw that platforms, they are a really low threshold for people to enter labor markets, because it's also like with Roamler, if you want to work 30 minutes a month, it's okay. Yeah. And there's no traditional employer that wants to employ you for 30 minutes a month or maybe 30 minutes a year. And same like also with Airbnb, you can just rent out your spare bedroom for one night a year. There's no hotel or bed and breakfast that want to do that. So by lowering these thresholds, it really offers lots of opportunity for people to enter labor market and to also do experience in labor market, also to work in different industries. So I think what I saw that every institution, also labor unions, but also the employment service, they also acknowledge, or not formally, but behind the scenes, acknowledge, okay, this platform way of working is really a low threshold to enter labor market. The only worry is, okay, it's a first step, but then there's nothing for many people. So what I then was looking, okay, so how can you solve this? At the other side, I also saw that people working via platforms are really building up data within the platform that really helps them to get more work and sometimes also better pay. So that's the ratings they get, but also the more functional data about, okay, how many keys did you do, what kind of industry, this kind of stuff. Because that really gives trust to the people that want to hire you via the platform. So then I thought, okay, but why don't give this data also to the worker? So what I did is I did a 1-year research funded by some platforms, labor unions, and other institutions, like also the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate in Netherlands, about so what are the opportunities in this, and what was already tried, and why did others fail? And then I saw there are opportunities to really try and make this happen. So then during a meeting in October 2020 with many platforms, there was quite some positive response on the idea. And then I thought, the only way to because there were still many questions, and also the debate on data portability is really formed based on many assumptions. And the way to validate assumption is just to do it. So that was the reason why I initiated GigCV, ClubCV in Dutch, to find a way how platforms can share this data within a digital resume with gig workers. And this was then another period of about, let's say, 8-9 months in talking and thinking, and also in designing and think, how can you make this happen also on a sustainable way? And this year in January we launched.
Congratulations. For me, it seems logical that their experiences are worth something, and there should be something out there in which they can validate the experiences that they've built up by working through different platforms. So is this one of the suitable solutions for the challenges that platform workers face?
I think it could be one solution. So because in the end, we're still validating. So the question is, of course, it's nice to give the worker their data, but what is the value? And does it also give them a higher chance to get work in other parts of labor markets? So there are many things we still don't know. But I think it's a really logical solution that it can contribute. And of course, it can contribute to a certain group of labor markets. Let's say people who are studying...
More active, I guess?
No, not only more active, but let's say people that want to be, let's say, a lawyer. So you're studying to be a lawyer, and you're making some money by working in a bar. Probably the data is for you for your future. Not this important. But let's say you are doing babysitting via a platform like Charity Cares, and you want to work in the sector. So then you can use this.
Like an au pair.
Yes.
Exactly.
So then you can use the data, but also for people with no work history at all. And then I will say, something is better than nothing. So there are different situations where this could work really good for workers. That's also something we're now going to research to learn more about that.
All right. And Wiggert, Roamler also implemented GigCV into their app. Why did you choose to participate in this project?
Yep, it's available in the app. You can easily download your GigCV at the moment.
So can I use my GigCV to get a higher salary now?
You can try. But then we'll have to see how many tasks you have performed. We implemented it because we really truly believe that Roamler should not be bound to only one platform, and they should also use other platforms as well. I think this is just a great way for them to own their data, and which they have right to have anyways. You know, the GDPR makes it really clear that they are entitled to this data. So one way or another, they should be able to get this data. And if we're gonna provide them, let's make it nice and usable, and not try to frustrate them to get out of data. One thing that you mentioned, Martijn, is that you're saying that you could use it. I kind of heard that you said to step up to a regular job. I don't see it as a step up. I see it as a side step or a different step. Could be for some people, it could be really a step up. Mm-hmm. But there's of course a lot of people that just wants to work through a platform, and in some stages of their life, platform works, and maybe if they, I don't know, have a different situation, they might want to enjoy the more fixedness of their job over the flexible way they worked at the platforms. But I think that's either way. It's let's have them use the GigCV.
And they can get it just by downloading the GigCV themselves. They don't have to go via Roamler and ask them to send
No, I think if you're a pro, you can just use it directly. Okay. I think that is something that you have to be in order to use it.
Nice.
And I have one question for Martijn. I think the GigCV, what you said, is something that you can use to show potential employees what you have done in the past. So, for example, if you use babysitting, then you could maybe apply for a kindergarten or something. I think it could also be a really good way for local governments or maybe governments to help people from a stage where they are unemployed to take the first steps, where in a platform you don't have a boss saying that you have to be there at 9 or something. So you can be more flexible in picking your own work at your pace. Do you see also a opportunity there with the GigCV? So to get people from unemployment through platforms to maybe regular jobs or maybe more on platforms?
Yeah, absolutely. I see this opportunity, and in basic, these are two questions. So the first part is, okay, can platform work be a solution for people who are unemployed to get work experience? And then second part is, okay, and then can you also, does this data that you then collect contributes to other opportunities within labor markets? And this can be on platforms or whatever. And yes, I see it as a big opportunity. What I also see, also talking to many local governments, also like here in Amsterdam and also in Utrecht, is that they like the idea, but they are afraid of experimenting because they only want to have the perfect solution for the people. Also knowing that a perfect solution probably will never be there. So I see in theory a lots of opportunities for local governments in experimenting with this. But in practice, I see they are quite afraid or not really willing to try. And then of course you also have the chicken egg problem, because they only want to join when it's perfect, but it can only be perfect when we experiment. So that's a challenge also for me with GigCV, where let's say the city of Amsterdam, Utrecht didn't want to cooperate because they were interested, but when we entered all the internal processes, that was the answer. So I'm also talking to other local governments in the Netherlands right now to try to do such an experiment, because it also really is one of the validation parts of GigCV to see, okay, does this data also contribute for people for more opportunities within labor markets?
So what does the future for platform workers look like?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think the only question is how does the future of platform work, but I think more broad about the future of work and the role of platforms in organizing work. Because now when we talk about platform work and gig economy, we're really looking on the really small on-demand task. But in the end, if you see the role of platforms in organization of labor markets, where in the end platforms can help to put the worker center and not the process or the manager, I think it's a much more interesting development. Because then you're also not talking about, okay, so what is your contract status? Because there are also platforms to organize work within organizations. Because in the end, so when you're working for a boss in an organization, you as a worker know always better what you want to do and what you can do than your manager. Always. No exception. At the moment that you also give this autonomy to the worker again and organize this via platforms, then I think that we have a much more flexible labor market also within existing labor contract relations. And then you also make people also much more responsible for their own work, but also for their own developments. Like now, we're saying there's a shortage on labor markets. But my answer is then always, okay, is it a shortage or is it just a problem in organization and allocation? So are there not enough people, or are we just organizing it as a wrong way that we can't do all the work with people we have? So I think that's the role of platforms in the organization of labor markets will be much bigger in the future. And it's not a technical development, but more a organizational and also behavioral elements. And there we're not talking about platform work, because in the end it's about work and the way how we organize it.
I completely agree. And I think this connects very well to the pass-on question from our previous guest, Bart Gutte. Bart is a business futurist, and he told us that you know him very well. He has an interesting question for you. He asked you the following.
My question to Martijn is, how does he foresee that these platforms will evolve next? Will they become really ecosystems which will be enriched with functionality, so that they are not only just for matching, but also an ecosystem to work within?
I think they will be I think they will offer in the end much more services than only the matching of demand and supply, which is also good for the platform itself, because if they're only doing the matching, it's also so then your competitive advantage is also not that big. And I think that the change will also be that now we're only looking to really isolate a task. Like, let's say with Uber, a Uber ride wherever in the world is a ride in a taxi from A to B. But I think also by getting more experience and also more learning about how this platform and also this matching works, you can also organize much more complex tasks, and then it will be also more interesting for a much bigger part of labor markets.
Right.
Anything to add, Wiggert?
Yeah, well, I got a question to add. My question would be, what do you see for opportunities for platforms to for the growth of people? So if you look at what, for example, Temper, they have the barista classes where you can just follow a barista course, and then you can not only be a dishwasher, but you can also be a barista, right? So I think that fits really well in what people like to do in terms of instant gratification, but then for work. So I do this barista class and then can be a barista, right? And I can make more money.
Yeah, I think there are quite some opportunities for platforms there, because in the end, at one side, as you also mentioned, they're facilitating, so they don't try to own the worker. At the other side, you also have, as platform, you also have benefits when people are working lots of hours via your platform, and also of course depending per platform. But with most platform, that's the case. So that's also challenge your platform in okay, how to be of maximal added value for this individual, and also how to get them on board in different stages of their career, because of course it can be a decision to say, okay, I only want to have workers and for 1 year, and then they have much more experience, and then we let them go. But of course, that's also a kind of waste that you have, especially for the platform, but also for the worker. So I think that platforms can do lots of things of really also helping and educating the worker, and that you also need to have also different kind of tasks, so we can also grow within tasks. And of course, there are already platforms doing this. They're maybe giving the newbies, the new workers, the simple task, and from there you can also grow in your role. But also with things like education and training, I think there are quite some challenges and also opportunities in that. And of course, then if you look at maybe, let's say, in 20 years, and also thinking about all the developments like Web3 and NFTs and these kind of blockchain stuff, they can also think, okay, maybe you can also organize it at a way that people are also partly investing within their own education and future, by also partly maybe paying in this themselves, but then they maybe can get money back while working via the platform. So there are different ways. And I also really then also want to challenge in finding a way that's this education part doesn't. Then I also want to challenge you to think about, okay, how can this education part not be the old school lock-in and a platform? Because in the end, that's also the trade-off that you also want to make, the balance, because you want to educate them, but you also want to work them via different platforms. And how are you going to find the balance in that? I think it will be a really nice
I think that's really simple. I think if platform workers can work through other platforms, and if they are making more money because of it, or because they can be more efficient. So, for example, if I, as a tech roamler, I do a installation in some neighborhood and do another task in the same neighborhood, that optimizes my route, right? So that's beneficial for the platform worker, and also in the end for us if they're more beneficial. And I think it's especially for like the high skilled people people that we serve as well through our platform, like the nurses and the technicians. I think it's more of a challenge for us to get them on board and to treat them really well, and to make sure that they're Roamler fans than anything else.
So we're entering the final stage of this episode. We always return to our main question here. Based on our conversation today, Martijn, what are the main trends around the platform economy and its users?
I think the main trends of platform economy are that platforms, they are in every sector now. Where we first thought, okay, this is only going to be in taxi and in home cleaning. There's no sector I can think about where platforms don't play a role. The trends, or maybe also wish, what I also see is that in the end, the platforms are really putting the user central instead of the process. Which of course there are quite some people that need to get used on that. And in the end, also the thresholds of starting new initiatives is also getting lower and lower because also technology and software is getting cheaper. But in the end, there is also really important to realize that in the end, the success of a platform doesn't rely on technology. Technology is nice, it makes it happen, but in the end, with good technology, you can build really bad platforms, and with crappy technology, you can have really good platforms. And that's also something I think is really important to realize.
For our next episode, we invited a platform worker, Wim Beverdam. Martijn, it's time for your pass-on question for the next FlexCast guest. What would you like to ask Wim?
So Wim, what I want to like to know from you is the question, do you think an initiative like GigCV is interesting for your personal situation? So why and why not? And at last, what kind of data is, in your opinion, valuable to receive?
All right, very interesting question, and I'll be sure to pass on the question to him in the next episode. That brings us to the end of this episode. A special thanks to Martijn Arets for joining us during this valuable discussion about the trends around the platform economy. Stay tuned. Did you like this conversation and would like to know more about flexible resourcing or platform work? Visit Roamler.com or follow Roamler on LinkedIn, where they share the latest knowledge, news, and trends about flexible resourcing and platform work. Thanks for listening to the FlexCast.